It was the railway that completed the conquest of Africa, begun by the Bible and the rifle of the white man. In the days of the scramble for Africa, a mighty line from Cape to Cairo was to be Britain's masterstroke, opening a new age.
Our description of this great railway project by presenting to you Cape Town, the starting point of the railway. This is an excellent portrait of Cecil Rhodes, the empire builder. It was here that his great dream of empire, a railway from Cape to Cairo, had its birth. A tremendous project, which since his death has made immense progress and is slowly but surely advancing to completion. Half a century has gone by since Rhodes conceived his colossal scheme. Let us now review the progress made to join South and North by rail, and look briefly at the great prosperity which has resulted from the undertaking.
Money. Money was to be the key, and the diamonds of one man in particular were to finance this dream of empire. In Cape Town there stands a memorial to Cecil John Rhodes. From here he still looks north to the heartland of the continent he planned to conquer and then bequeath to the British Empire. But where did such a man find his inspiration? At Oxford, the builder of empire had thrilled to the words of the scholar of art, John Ruskin.
I cannot express the amazed awe with which I sometimes watch a locomotive take its breath at a railway station, and think what work there is in its bars and wheels, and what manner of men they must be who beat it into its polished calm of power. Titanian hammer strokes beating out of lava, these glittering cylinders and timely respondent valves, and fine-ribbed rods which touch each other as a serpent writhes, in noiseless gliding and omnipotence of grasp. What assemblage of accurate and mighty faculties in them! More than fleshly power over melting crag and coiling fire, fettered and finessed at last into the precision of watchmaking.
Of steam that could pierce, penetrate, possess the heart of Africa and subject her to Britain. And now, 100 years later, here's the blue train of South African railways. One of the most luxurious expresses in the world. Not particularly fast, but very, very comfortable. A train fit for proconsuls and diamond millionaires. Yes, Rhodes would have saluted all this.
embroidery it when you're done.
Going north indeed from Cape Town, but alas for Rhodes's vision, this train only goes to South Africa's capital Pretoria, and not as planned in 1889, all the way to Cairo. The power game started by Rhodes ended in the fall of the British Empire. The seats Rhodes reserved for the British rulers have gone to others.
900.
This was the idea, but European political rivalries made it an impossibility. Today you can't actually travel this route by train, but to Rhodes it all looked so much simpler. Britain sat on both ends of Africa, and no matter who was in the middle could run the show. Cape Town, nestling under Table Mountain, had been a British halfway house to India for 75 years when Rhodes came to transform it. The sleepy Dutch trading post turned into a thriving commercial city. This is Adderley Street today, and 50 years ago, with the attitudes of 50 years ago.
In the early stages of construction, the native labourer, always very willing and teachable, played a great part. There were certainly plenty of him. His wages were not excessive, and he didn't belong to any union. But he worked hard from morn till night, and the line gradually assumed shape and form. These native gangs are easy to handle. They respond splendidly to training and soon become expert hands in the arduous work of rail construction. You can see how efficiently they pull together, and how thoroughly and wholeheartedly they help progress.
Railways are still being built at breakneck speed in Africa. Here in South Africa, as elsewhere, new lines appear for political motives. One to link Rhodesia, one to bypass Mozambique. Lines built not to extend white supremacy, but to defend what remains of it. As the frontiers of Rhodes's world crumble away before the tide of black nationalism, white men still build railways, not now to make history, but to stop it. On grew the line, through the Cape Mountains and the Karoo Desert, through Mafeking and into Bechuanaland. By 1901, it was in Rhodesia, Rhodes' own country.
This is Bulawayo, now a prosperous township, situated 1,360 miles from Cape Town. Bulawayo is an important landmark in the Cape to Cairo line and one of its busiest centres. time, the energies of Sir Robert Williams and other pioneers are being devoted to the fresh discoveries of precious minerals to enable further railway extension, east, north and west, to complete Cecil Rhodes's scheme.
So the white man introduced the unsophisticated African to the joys of the pit and to the marvels of advanced technology. The railway made mineral discoveries worthwhile. Diamonds, gold, coal, chrome, copper. Wherever and whatever was found, the railway followed. In 1905 it crossed the Victoria Falls. With an eye on future tourists, Rhodes had insisted that the line be built near enough for the spray to wet the carriage windows. This monument to his vision, Rhodes never lived to see. At the Egyptian end of the line, well, quite another Africa. Cairo, largest city in Africa by far, in the 1860s, was nominally under Turkish rule. Its greatest governor, the Khedive Ismail, was actually ahead of Rhodes in bringing Africa into the railway age. Preserved now in a corner of this forgotten Cairo museum lies this monument to the Khedive's vision, an inspection rail car built, no expense spared, by Robert, son of George Stephenson, another export tailored in Britain to the taste of an Oriental despot. Khedive hoped that with the aid of railways he would control the Nile right to its source in the Great Lakes. The British wanted that too, but ahead the way was barred. The Mahdi had raised the holy flag of revolt in the Sudan and had killed General Gordon here at Khartoum. Railways had challenged the Mahdi's control over the tribes of the northern Sudan, and he'd reacted by tearing the track up, even having his Fuzzy-Wuzzys crucify their Egyptian captives on the rails. But while the Sudanese celebrated their triumph, the army of General Kitchener was building a new line 400 miles across the desert. Its purpose? To join up with Rhodes and avenge Gordon's death. At the Battle of Omdurman, 27,000 Sudanese were killed. What the young Winston Churchill called a river war had turned out to be a railway war. So the Sudan, indeed the entire Nile, was added to the British Empire. It was a primitive, impoverished land, But railway construction was vigorously pushed on, and in time a railway network created and unified a new state, the largest in Africa. It is a strait that only railways made possible, for the Sudan's length is about a quarter of the Cape to Cairo line of rail, its area, 1 million square miles, the size of India. When the railways came, its wealth was gum Arabic. Now it has a vast cotton industry, and it could export almost every tropical product there is, if only it wasn't so large, so poor, and this line its only link with the sea. Let's remember 400 miles of single-track line, 3 foot 6 inch wide, across one of the cruelest of deserts. This is the lifeline of the Sudan. The railway workshops in Atbara are the largest industrial complex in the country. The latest diesel engines are maintained here, progressing from the simpler techniques of steam. Ruskin's locomotive has taught Africans to master modern technology, to become, like the rest of us, as we say, machine-minded. Atbara employs 7,000 workers, all under Sudanese management. On a reduced scale, the Sudan shows what railways can do for the whole continent of Africa. While the Mahdists had held the Sudan, Britain had had to find another way to the Great Lakes and to Uganda from the east. And her gateway to East Africa was Mombasa, once a metropolis for Arab traders and slavers. Inland from Mombasa lay beautiful but little-known country, an interior, teeming with wildlife, but inhospitable. This was what greeted a railway engineer fresh-faced from home, a wilderness, scorching and parched, covered with thorn bushes and dense scrub. Soaring temperatures, treacherous endemic diseases, and a wildlife which was not programmed to cooperate. Hippos undermined the culverts. Rhinos charged the locomotives. Untamable elephants smashed and destroyed the works. Creatures great and small exacted their toll. On the railway as it is today, the odd snapping signal cable is the only regular hazard. It's hard to recapture how epic was that struggle against the old Africa. Tribesmen called this intruder the Iron Snake, as it uncoiled itself remorselessly through their ancestral lands. Within a year, the railway was able to carry British troops nearly half the way to crush a revolt in Uganda, which finished Germany's ambitions in this area. In 1900, the line reached the Great Rift Valley. But it had reached fertile country at last, country like home. Farming could provide payloads. Noblemen and gentlemen settled in the highlands and created a new feudal England in tropical Africa. It lasted just 60 years. Today, Jomo Kenyatta, Kenya's first president, looks out over Nairobi. The capital stands on the site of the construction headquarters of 1899. It is the creation of the railway. Mr. Charles Ochwo, station master at the Equator Station, prepares to accept an up-freight train from Mombasa on its way to Uganda. Over 8,700 feet above sea level, twice the height of Ben Nevis. Across the charmingly marked equator line rolls the traffic which sustains Rwanda, Burundi, and the Uganda of President Amin. Fuel oil, grain, food, machinery, and the coffee and cotton to buy them depend on the trains. Even water, the most precious commodity of all when the rains fail, comes by rail tanker to drought-stricken places, here on the Kenya-Tanzania border. Along the tracks, the land blossoms. Villages expand. People enjoy security. A hard life gets easier. "25,000 Indians were brought by the British here to Mombasa to build the Uganda Railway. Most of them stayed on. Indian traders helped build East Africa, but now the Africans are kicking them out. Mr. Kirpal Singh, one of East Africa Railway's crack drivers.
Out of 40,000 people working for the railways, there were nearly 25,000 Indians. But now you hardly find about 25 or 30 Indians left, you know. My father, he worked for the railways about 34 years. And I had my elder brother also working for railways. He worked for nearly, say, about 10 years before he left. My younger brother also, and they are in UK. And I'm the only one who's left here now.
Mr. Singh's Bayer Garrett, number 5918, the largest meter gauge steam engine working in the world.
It's one of the cleanest locomotives, I hope, in the world over, because it's quite well known. A lot of people come from out country, you know, to see especially the footplate, the way we have maintained it. Yeah, I love it, you see, it's my hobby, I love keeping it clean and all polished. And really enjoyed doing that.
250 tons of locomotive, hauling 1,200 tons of freight from sea level to over 9,000 feet over a distance of 600 miles. It took 5 years to get the rails to the lake, and both on the rival German Tanganyika Railway as on the British Uganda line, many lives were lost. 28 Indian plate layers were devoured by man-eating lions at Tsavo Bridge, but the lions showed no race prejudice. Superintendent Ryle's martyrdom has been reconstructed on film. Though warned that a man-eater was around, he and his 2 companions failed to keep a good watch. The lion waited till they fell asleep, coolly opened the door of the coach, selected the super, made off with him and consumed him. Today, lion watching is a big attraction for tourists, and what stopped the revenue of the railway now adds to Kenya's income. The line runs right through the middle of Tsavo Game Reserve. 100 miles inland at Voi, a branch line turns off to link Kenya with Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. On the map, you can now travel from the Albert Nile via Dar, Lusaka and Bulawayo all the way to Cape Town. But they aren't selling tickets yet. When we cross the bridge between black African railways and white African railways, little differences appear. In this railway training school at Esselin Park, near Johannesburg, young trainees are learning to operate signalling systems, traffic marshalling yards and block working, apparently in their Sunday best. It's much the same work as on any of the railways from Cairo to the Cape. But here you see no black faces. This is South Africa, where the ruling is that such skilled work is for white men, and black men just aren't ready for it yet. When a train runs through from Rhodesia to Zambia, the white driver hands over to a black driver. So here, Afrikaner trainees prepare for a career on the railways, and no black men need apply. It's called job reservation.
Indien die lyn vorentoe vry is, dan moet ek kyk na my absoluut permissieblok traject se kant toe. Daar het ons gewoonlik 'n kleurligsignaal. Hierdie wit liggie wat ons hier het. Daar loop nie nou 'n trein op die oomblik nie, so ons traject toe gaan signaal is toon, ons kan hom bedien. Goed, ek gaan na die diagram toe. Ek merk daarop dat probeer dan by my traject gaan hier verbygaan. Dan plaas ek hom terug op die paard. Dit sal op my help.
Ah, but there is one very responsible job for black men in the ranks of the railway police. A rehearsal for their passing out parade. And the song they're singing? It's Come Back Africa, Africa Sikulele, the We Shall Overcome of Southern Africa's black masses. Here they come, packed in the commuter trains driven by white men, from their segregated townships like Soweto, here to Johannesburg, to the city of gold, to work in white people's offices, factories, gracious homes. So it's no surprise to find that the railway police are as paramilitary as the rest of South African security forces. It's another reminder that the railways play a key role in the struggle between white attitudes and black ambitions. White Rhodesia depends on the railways, the links to South Africa its lifelines. If black guerrillas were permanently to cut these lines, Rhodesia would have to give in. The threat of this, in the end, drove Ian Smith to a conference in Geneva and to accept the principle of black rule. If he fought to the last cartridge, the outcome would be decided on the railways. A thing undreamed of when Africa was red from top to toe, in the 30s, rich Americans could buy a cooked tour along the still uncompleted Cape to Cairo route. By sea from Europe, by train from Cape Town to Bukama in the Belgian Congo, by steamer downriver to Standerville, by limousine from Standerville to Uganda and on into the Sudan. A most interesting trip. Then down the Nile by steamer and rail to Khartoum. Plenty of work for the Kodak. And so to Cairo and the pyramids. Those days have gone, yet the biggest gap still remains between Sudan and Uganda, about 400 miles of thinly populated scrub. Here at Wau, Rhodes and Kitchener's dream died. The great Cape to Cairo scheme ends in a pair of buffers in the bush. It looks rough country, but it's not difficult for railway engineers and builders. Did the money run out? Why did the vision fade? The light fail? The aircraft made Trans-African blue trains seem superfluous. The first Cape to Cairo flight was made as early as 1926. So the airplane became Africa's workhorse. But is this the end of railways? Listen to Mr. Okero, Kenya's Minister of Transport.
The air is a very good means of promoting links to, because it travels fast and it covers greater distances. But it's still a means that is limited to the very few. And so in Africa, the African leaders do meet pretty regularly, traveling by air. But I don't think the people they rule can ever expect to use air transport because it just is still too expensive. I think the railway really is the vehicle which would promote greater development among common people. In other words, it's much easier when you have a rail link for the ordinary chap to get into a railway coach and travel to a neighboring country. And we in Kenya do look very much to the future when we would have links with the Sudan and direct link through the northwestern part of Kenya near Lake Turkana by rail to Juba in the southern Sudan. And then there will be a great deal of trade between us and the Sudan, both in agricultural products and the manufactured goods that Kenya can manufacture.
So something like this may be Mr. Okero's Inter-African Express of the future. Passengers at Khartoum for the down train to Nyala and Wau. It's hardly the blue train. It takes about 5 days for the 500-mile trip, but no one's in a hurry. This is the easygoing pace of the classical railway age, which we, in our frenetic world of advanced passenger trains and jet airliners, have quite forgotten. Now it seems almost biblical in its simplicity. It's friendly, functional, and above all, cheap. But to those used to the pace of camels, it's still the difference between medieval and modern times. And here, at Wau, stands the Up Express for Khartoum. Wau may someday be the crew of Africa, with links from Mombasa, from Kinshasa, from Lagos. Maybe. But now there's only one passenger train a week, and that's quite an event. The railway matters to these people. They can do without intercity and restaurant cars, season tickets and railway car parks. A simple railway gives them new jobs, new markets, new crops, new hope. With a complete network of lines, Africa would have its iron backbone and iron ribs, as other continents have, as Rhodes dreamed. Would have, will have. The railways that the colonialists lost faith in, other nations are helping Africa to build. 50,000 Chinese built the Tanzam line, linking Dar and the Zambian Copperbelt, ironically, to bypass blockaded Rhodesia. 1,200 miles long, it's the biggest railway project since Rhodes. Finished in 1975, 2 years ahead of schedule, with bridges, tunnels, workshops, scores of stations. 4 international trains a week do the 2-day journey each way. Third-class fare, about £5. This is the way to encourage Africans to think continentally. Its main use is to carry Zambian copper to the sea. So Rhodes is strangely fulfilled, but Ruskin's all-conquering steam locomotive now yields to diesel. A brewery is the last undignified resting place of one of Zambia's remaining steam locos. Its purpose? To make steam for the brewery's bottling plant. Such humiliations may be inevitable, but famous engines should be spared them. All over the continent, steam locomotives are being hauled away to the scrapyard. But here in the Sudan, at least Kitchener's engine is being preserved. In South Africa, steam lingers yet a while to tell the story of darkest Africa's conquest by rail. But more and more steam engines are shunted into the graveyard. Mr. Gordon Watson, shed master at Diyar, among his monuments.
Well, this place that I've set aside, we call it the Garden of Remembrance. Well, for me it is anyway, because every engine that stands here, and there's 20 of them, I've actually seen them all working. To the ordinary layman, a steam engine is just a piece of metal, but to myself and a lot of other people, it's something alive.
Then let us look our last on this lovely animal of wild Africa before it's finally extinct. So Rhodes imagined it, roaring 6,000 miles northward. Absurd? Perhaps. The sun has set on Rhodes, the empire, the steam locomotive, impartial. But Africa goes on building railways, and one way or another, there'll be a track from Cape to Cairo.
Sigele,